Welcome to Untold Black Legend. The sound isn't screams. It's worse than that. It's the scrape of knees against sacred marble. October 30th, 1501. You're seated inside the private apartments of the Pope. The air smells of wine and incense. Your hand shakes as you lift your cup, but you don't put it down because putting it down would mean accepting what you're seeing is real. Around you, cardinals in scarlet robes refuse to look up. Some whisper prayers. Others shut their eyes completely. And on the floor of the Vatican, on ground meant to be holy, 50 naked women crawl like animals, gathering chestnuts scattered across the marble. The vicar of Christ watches from his throne. He's laughing. That's what chills you to the bone. Because this isn't punishment. This is entertainment. And the bride, she doesn't know yet. Before sunrise, her own father has planned something for her. Something precise. Something merciless, not meant to end her life, but to strip away everything that makes life worth living. Stay with me, because this story was buried for over 500 years, and by the end, you'll understand why history wanted it forgotten. This is the story of Lucrezia, Borgia, and the night that should have damned the Vatican forever. If stories like this pull you in, subscribe to the channel and drop a like. It takes 1 second, and it helps bring forgotten voices back into the light. And tell me, which country are you watching from? Comment your country's name below. 3 weeks earlier, December 1501. A lone rider passes through the gates of Rome, looking less like a groom and more like a man walking toward execution. Alfonso d'Este, 25 years old, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, born into a dynasty that ruled northern Italy for centuries, and he's terrified because he's come to marry a woman wrapped in whispers and blood. Her first husband, publicly shamed, declared impotent, and discarded when he stopped being useful. Her second, stabbed on the steps of the Vatican. When he survived, men were sent to finish the job, strangled in his bed while Lucrezia screamed and beat her fists against the locked door. Now Alfonso is next. He rides into the most powerful city on earth, knowing one thing for certain. In Rome, love is a weapon, marriage is a transaction, and survival is never guaranteed. That was 18 months ago. Now it's your turn. Alfonso tried everything to escape. Excuses, delays. His father begged the Pope to choose someone else. The response from Rome was simple. Accept the alliance or watch Chase's armies reduce Ferrara to ash. So here he is. The reception is designed to break him. Pope Alexander CSC receives him in the throne room. 69 years old, corpulent, radiating power like heat from a furnace. His eyes scan Alfonso the way a butcher examines livestock. To his right stands Cesare Borgia, 26, cardinal turned general. The man who strangled Alfonso's predecessor. He doesn't speak during the entire reception. He just watches, a faint smile at his lips, like a cat that's already decided when to strike. For 3 weeks, Alfonso endures humiliations disguised as celebration. Banquets, where he's seated next to courtesans while cardinals smirk. Hunting parties where Cesare demonstrates his marksmanship. Receptions where the Pope jokes about his dead predecessors. Every night, Alfonso writes letters to his father that he knows are being read and wonders which day will be his last. Then comes the wedding, the papal chapel, golden walls reflecting candlelight, fresco of saints, and angels looking down on the assembly. The smell of incense, so thick it coats your throat. Pope Alexander VI officiates personally. His voice echoes through the chamber as he speaks the sacred words that will bind his daughter to her third husband. Alfonso stands at the altar. His hands won't stop shaking. He can feel Cesare's eyes on the back of his neck throughout the entire ceremony. Cold, patient. The gaze of a predator watching prey that doesn't realize it's already caught. And beside him stands Lucrezia, 21 years old. Golden hair arranged in elaborate braids threaded with pearls. A gown of silk and gold worth more than most Italian villages. She's beautiful in a way that almost hurts to look at. But her eyes are what stop you. They're empty. Not sad, not angry, not frightened, just vacant, like someone who left their body years ago and never fully returned. The night before, while her handmaidens prepared her trousseau, Lucia had stood at her window, looking out at Rome, the city where she was born, the city where she watched her second husband bleed on the steps, the city that had taken everything from her and kept demanding more. One of her ladies, a young girl from Naples, had asked if she was excited for the wedding. Lucrezia had smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind of smile you learn when showing real emotion is dangerous. Excited, she repeated like she was testing a word from a foreign language. Yes, of course. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the chapel of Santa Maria in Portico until dawn, kneeling on cold stone, praying to a God who had never answered. Not when they annulled her first marriage and called her used goods. Not when they murdered Alonso in the room next to hers. Not once in 21 years, but she prayed anyway because prayer was the only thing left that belonged to her. Now she stands at the altar speaking vows she doesn't believe to a man she doesn't know, in a ceremony controlled by a father who has never seen hers anything but currency. This is a woman who has learned that showing emotion in her family is dangerous, that tear can be weaponized, that love can be twisted into a knife and buried in your chest. She speaks her vows in a voice so flat it barely registers as human. Alfonso responds in kind. Two people performing a ritual neither believes in. Surrounded by men who have already decided her fate. The rings are exchanged. The Pope pronounces them married, and then Alexander smiles, that wide predatory smile, and announces that now the true celebration can begin. The guests are led to the Borgia apartments for the wedding feast. The doors close behind them. Guards take position at every exit. And Lucrezia feels something she hasn't felt in years. Not fear. She's beyond fear something colder. The certainty that her father is about to teach her a new lesson. And whatever it is, she will survive it the way she survived everything else. By going somewhere inside herself where they can't reach. By becoming empty before they can empty her. The feast begins like any aristocratic wedding. Roasted peacock with gold leaf. Mountains of exotic fruits. Wine that costs more per bottle than a peasant earns in a year. Musicians play. Poets recite verses praising the bride and groom. Laughter echoes off the painted walls. Hours pass. The wine flows. Conversation grows louder, looser. Some guests begin to relax. Alonso almost lets himself believe this is just a wedding. Then he notices the guards have multiplied. Then he notices Jez hasn't touched his wine all night. Then he notices the Pope is staring at him, not warmly, expectantly, like a man waiting for a performance to begin. Midnight approaches. Tezer stands. The room falls silent instantly, as if someone has cut the strings of every voice at once. He walks to the side doors and gives a quiet order. The doors up. 50 women enter the hall. They're dressed in magnificent gowns, velvet and silk, adorned with jewels that catch the candlelight. These aren't common prostitutes. These are Rome's elite courtesans, women who normally serve cardinals, ambassadors, the highest levels of power. But their eyes are wrong, wide with fear, darting toward the exits that are blocked by armed guards. Pope Alexander rises from his throne, wine cup raised, smile widening. Now he announces the true entertainment begins. At his command, women begin to undress. One by one, gowns fall to the marble floor. Silk puddles around bare feet. 50 women stand completely naked before the assembled princes of the church. Some cardinals look away, others clutch rosaries, lips moving in prayers that feel obscene in this context. A few younger clergy lean forward, drunk enough to forget themselves. Alfonso stares at his plate. His knuckles are white around his knife, but Alexander isn't finished. Servants enter carrying baskets of chestnuts. They scatter them across the floor, hundreds rolling between the feet of horrified guests, disappearing under tables, spreading across the sacred marble. Then the Pope announces the rules. The women must crawl on all fours and collect the chestnuts. Whoever gathers the most wins prizes from the papal treasury. Silk robes, golden necklaces, jewels. Picture this: 50 naked women on their hands and knees crawling between the legs of cardinals and bishops beneath. Fresco of the Virgin Mary, across floors where popes have walked for centuries. The sound, knees scraping stone, the clink of chestnuts gathered in trembling hands, stifled sobs, and above it all, laughter. The Pope laughing, Tezer laughing, the sound bouncing off golden walls like something from hell's own banquet. Some guests join in, throwing chestnuts farther, making the women crawl longer distances. Others sit frozen, minds unable to process what they're witnessing. An elderly cardinal stands and tries to leave. Guards block his path. He sits back down and doesn't lift his head again for the rest of the night. And Lucrezia sits, seem motionless beside Alonso. Her face betrays nothing. She's learned to go somewhere else inside herself when her family performs. It's the only way to survive. The banquet continues for hours. When it finally ends, the quarter sons huddling corners, clutching their humiliating prizes, unable to look anyone. Alonso thinks it's over. He's wrong, because now the Pope rises again, and the words he speaks next will echo through history for 500 years. The sacred duty of marriage, Alexander announces, must now be fulfilled. In any normal wedding, consummation happens privately. Perhaps witnesses verify the sheets the next morning. Uncomfortable but standard for noble families. What Alexander orders is something else entirely. Alonso and Lucrezia will consummate their marriage tonight. Not once, 3 times, and every person in this room will serve as witness. The hall goes silent, not quiet, silent. The complete absence of sound that happens when an entire room stops breathing at once. Even Chaser shows a flicker of surprise. Even he didn't expect his father to go this far. Alfonso stands. His face has gone the color of old bone. He's a prince. He spent his entire life training in dignity, honor, the codes of nobility, and he's just been ordered to perform the most intimate act of his life, as public theater. He looks at the guards, at Cesare, whose hand rests casually on his sword, at the Pope, whose smile hasn't wavered. There is no escape. They're led to an adjoining chamber, a room normally used for receiving ambassadors, now furnished with a bed draped in silk. The doors remain open. Guests are positioned in the outer hall with direct sight lines. What happens over the next several hours strips away every layer of human dignity until nothing remains but flesh and shame. Alonso, psychologically shattered, surrounded by armed men and watching eyes, consummates the marriage. His movements are mechanical. His mind has retreated somewhere far away. Lucrezia lies beneath him, eyes fixed on the ceiling, silent still. She survived 2 husbands. She knows how to separate her soul from her body, how to become an empty vessel until the storm passes. But here's what breaks you. Afterward, Cesare personally enters the chamber. He inspects the evidence with clinical detachment. Hen, he announces loudly enough for everyone to hear that the first consummation has occurred, and he orders them to wait 1 hour and repeat it. 1 hour. Imagine that hour. Alonso sitting on the edge of the bed, unable to look at his wife. Lucrezia lying motionless, staring at nothing. The murmur of voices in the outer hall. Servants refreshing wine for guests who can't leave, and the knowledge that in 60 minutes, it begins again. The second consummation happens around 2 a.m. Both of them are operating in states of complete dissociation now. Bodies moving without minds attached. Humanity switched off because the alternative is madness. In the outer room, cardinals murmur prayers that taste like ash. Courtesans who were humiliated hours earlier weep silently for Lucrezia. Even the guards shift uncomfortably, but no one intervenes. No one speaks. No one does anything because the Pope commands it and the Pope speaks for God. Then comes dawn. First gray light touching the windows of the Borgia apartments, and Alexander orders the third and final act. When it's complete, Cesare announces triumphantly that the marriage is now sealed 3 times over, absolutely irrevocable under church and secular law. No annulment possible, no escape clause, no way out. The Pope raises his wine cup for a final toast. Alonso sits at the edge of the bed, head in his hands, his entire body trembling. He'll return to Ferrara, a broken man. He'll never speak of this night. Not to his family, not to his children, not to anyone ever. And Lucrezia lies still in her wedding gown, eyes open, seeing nothing. Her soul has retreated so far inside that it may never fully return. They wanted to destroy her while she kept breathing. They succeeded. Here's where we need to stop and ask a question that most histories ignore. How? How does a family become capable of this? Because nobody wakes up one morning and decides to destroy their own daughter in front of 50 witnesses. That kind of cruelty is built layer by layer, year by year, until the monster in the mirror is all they've ever known. Fort Lane 31, Spain. A boy named Rodrigo is born into the Borgia family. Minor nobility, respectable, but nothing special. Then his uncle becomes Pope. Overnight, everything changes. The Borgias aren't Spanish nobodies anymore. They're the family of the most powerful man in Christendom. Rodrigo is brought to Rome at 16, and what he finds there reshapes his soul. The Italian nobility despises them. They call the Borgias foreigners, Spanish dogs. At banquets, Rodrigo watches cardinals whisper behind their hands. He sees the smirks, the contempt, the certainty that his family doesn't belong. Something hardens inside him. He learns that in Rome, virtue is performance. The men who preach humility own palaces. The cardinals who condemn lust keep mistresses. The system runs on one fuel, power. Everything else is decoration. So, Rodrigo stops trying to belong, he starts trying to dominate, he as his way to cardinal at 25. Father's children openly builds a network of spies and assassins across Italy. In 1492, he bribes his way to the papacy itself. By then, he had internalized Rome's lesson completely. People are tools. Snort, love is leverage. Family isn't sanctuary, it's arsenal. Cesare was his blade, trained from childhood in violence, and showing no mercy. Cardinal at 18, not from faith but utility. When military power became more valuable, he abandoned his robes without thought. Conquered cities, murdered rivals in their beds, poisoned dinner guests. Machiavelli watched Cesare and thought, this is what a perfect prince looks like. But Lucrezia was the renewable resource. From the moment she could understand language, Lucrezia learned her value wasn't who she was. It was who she could be married to. Her beauty wasn't a gift. It was an asset to catalog. First marriage at 13. Giovanni Forza. By 1497, the alliance was useless. The Borgias needed an annulment. The grounds Giovanni declared impotent, publicly, humiliatingly. A lie, so obvious all Italy laughed, but no one contradicted. Lucrezia learned your body belongs to the family. Your reputation belongs to the family. Even truth belongs to the family. Second marriage at 17, Alonso of Aragon. And here's the cruel part. She actually loved him. Witnesses described how her face lit up when he entered, how they walked in the Vatican gardens laughing like children who'd found something real. Then Acer decided Alonso was no longer useful. The first assassination attempt failed. Alonso survived the stabbing. Lucrezia nursed him herself, cooking his meals because she trusted no one else. For 1 month she fought for him, believed she could save him. Then Chizier's men came, threw her out of the room, strangled her husband while she screamed and pounded on the door. She was 19. That's when Lucrezia stopped being a person and became a ghost wearing a person's face. By her 3rd wedding, she had learned the family's final lesson. Hope is the cruelest weapon. It makes you believe things can be different, and when they take it, the wound is deeper than if you'd never hoped at all. The ceremony in the Boer apartments wasn't her breaking point. It was just the most public performance of a destruction that had been happening her entire life. Within days, news of the wedding spreads across Europe like plague. Ambassadors sent encrypted dispatches to Venice, Florence, Milan, Paris. The reports are read with horrified disbelief. The Venetian ambassador writes, "What has occurred in the Vatican surpasses anything from the darkest days of the Roman Empire." But here's what happened to the people in that room. Pope Alexander VI died 2 years later, possibly poisoned, an ironic end for a man who poisoned so many others. Charles Borgia lost everything the moment his father's heart stopped. He died in 1507, ambushed in Spain, his body torn apart and buried in an unmarked grave. The machine they built consumed them both. And Lucrezia lived another 18 years. The journey to Ferrara took a month. Witnesses described her as silent, staring out the window at landscapes she didn't seem to see. She didn't speak for the first 3 days. She moved in with Alonso, who could barely look at her. Their marriage existed in permanent winter. They shared meals in silence. They produced heirs out of duty. The weight of that unspoken night hung between them like a wall neither could climb. But Lucrezia refused to disappear. She threw herself into charity, walked among the common people, patronized artists and poets. She became against all expectations beloved by Ferrara. They called her La Borda Duchessa, the good duchess. She had 8 children. She ran her husband's court. She earned respect through actions, not birthright. But her ladies reported she woke screaming from nightmares, that sometimes her eyes would go distant mid-con conversation, that she spent hours kneeling on cold chapel stone, praying to a god who had never answered. She never returned to Rome, not once in 18 years. She died in 1519, giving birth to her last child, 39 years old. Her final words, "I am ready to finally be free." Free. So why does this story matter 500 years later? Because it's not about the Borgias. It's about the architecture of destruction, the way systems built to protect become instruments of annihilation, the way power, when it answers to nothing, turns on the people's CL. Oses to it. The night of October 30th, 1501, wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of absolute authority. When the Pope himself orchestrates something like this surrounded by cardinals who do nothing, it proves something terrifying. The corruption wasn't a flaw. The corruption was the system. The Vatican tried to bury this story. Records destroyed. Burchard's diary hidden for centuries. But here's what they didn't understand. You can burn documents, silence witnesses, rewrite histories. But you cannot erase what people carry inside them, and you cannot kill what gets carved into stone. Jan Burchard wrote his account knowing it might cost him everything. He wrote anyway because some truths are too heavy to carry alone. Because silence is never neutral, because silence makes you complicit, and because the dead deserve witnesses. 500 years later, we finally hear her voice not spoken aloud, but preserved in fragments, letters, and the spaces history tried to erase. Lucrezia Borgia was never meant to survive history. She was meant to vanish. A bargaining chip, a footnote in her father's ambition, a body move, across maps to seal alliances between violent men. Instead, she outlived them all. Her father, the Pope, who turned holiness into spectacle, died by poison. Some say his own. Her brother, the architect of so much blood, was torn apart in exile. The same machine they built to control the world consumed them both. But Lucrezia endured. From the wreckage, she built something astonishing, a life. She ruled Ferrara not as a scandal, but as a duchess. She raised children who never knew the horrors whispered about their mother. She governed, patronized artists, protected scholars, and earned respect in a world designed to deny her agency. She did not die as a Borgia. She died as Lucrezia of Ferrara, something she chose to become. They tried to destroy her name. They tried to reduce her to rumors and accusations. They tried to break her spirit by turning her family into executioner and her marriage into a cage. But she kept breathing, and every breath was an act of resistance. And that is the lesson echoing across centuries. Power can take your body. It can take your dignity. It can steal your childhood, your safety, even your wedding night. It can force you to smile while standing inside a grave. But there is one thing it cannot take. The part of you that chooses to survive. It cannot reach the place where you decide who you are. It cannot silence the voice that says, even in the darkest room, I am still here. That is what Lucrezia held onto through scandal, through violence, through 18 years of endurance until her final breath. I am still here. And 500 years later, so is her story. If this story reached you, subscribe. We uncover the chapter's history tried to erase. Because the past isn't dead, it's waiting to be remembered.